Hey guys, Sean Adamson, the Rehab and Documentation Guru. I don't know about you, but I am really hating mask life lately. I'm getting breakout right along like the what would you call this speech therapist? This area, and it follows basically the line of the masks, and it's really annoying. I'm too old to worry about things like acne again. Don't mind the wobble. Let me try to make this steadier again. I'm using my selfie stick, which I've not been using, for a little bit better holding experience on my part. How are you? My last video on loving both Biden and Trump got some thumbs down. Oh well. Now that's not what I'm going to talk about today, but I thought I'd bring it up. It was kind of interesting to see people's reactions. What I am going to talk about today, though, is the issue of when you get a patient from another therapist because that patient decided that they didn't like the other therapist. So, for example, I got a recent patient who uh, I was told did not want the original therapist back, and so I went in and I'm interviewing the patient, assessing them. It was a reassessment, and the subject came up of the previous therapist, and I just asked, being open and honest, what was concerning to you about the previous therapist, because I want to make sure, one, I don't repeat that as an issue, if at all possible, so that they have a bad experience with me as well. And they said they just felt like the therapist gave up on them. Didn't seem that like they had much opportunity for improvement. Now, I will tell you about this patient, not looking great from an opportunity of improvement perspective, so rehabilitation perspective, but there's definitely some key areas that are going on that are not being addressed, and frankly, the treatment approach would make it so that we wouldn't get anywhere with this patient. And so I just want to talk about that. Sorry, by the way, you're getting a part of my steering wheel. That's what you're seeing in the corner here, in the shot. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that and just kind of reason with you through a justifiable approach when you get one of those situations. I would imagine most of us have gotten this, where we end up taking over a patient because they didn't want another therapist. Um, and I'm sure occasionally, although I'm such a nice guy, I can't imagine this ever happening, that I've had patients ask for somebody other than me. In fact, I can think of one situation where they asked for somebody other than me. I ticked them off because I told them my honest opinion, and and frankly, I probably could have been a little bit more uh, loving. And I don't mean I was harsh or anything. I was kind of straightforward, clinical. I could have been a little bit more emotive in discussing with them why I didn't think they were going to progress. But anyway, I digress. How do you approach these situations where you end up being the second fiddle? The person that comes in and cleans up, the designated hitter for the other therapist. And the one thing I want to make sure of in those situations is I don't disparage the other therapist. So I don't necessarily agree with them on what their perception is of the other therapist. So this particular patient said that he didn't really feel like the therapist gave him a shot and gave up on him. All I can do in those situations is affirm what the other therapist had to say. Um, or I should say, not affirm what the other therapist had to say, but affirm what the patient's feeling. So, just acknowledging that they felt that way. And then just say, well, let's take a look at what they previously looked at and see where you are today. And see if there has been some progress since that time or not. And that way you set up the patient for the possibility that maybe they haven't had any progress. Maybe it's accurate that they're not making gains. That is some serious bass that just went by. I've got the windows open because it is gorgeous. So anyway, I want to affirm that a previous assessment was done by that therapist, treatment was done, and that it's an opportunity to look from a second pair of eyes. And one of the ways I can affirm the other therapist is say basically that two sets of eyes are always better than one. And I would be somewhat self-deprecating in this particular situation and say, oh, I know this therapist, and I'm not sure if I can see things differently than them, but let me give it a try. So, one, you acknowledge the humanity of both you and the previous therapist. Two, you acknowledge the possibility that there might not be anything new under the sun and might not be an opportunity for actual improvement. And then three, you set them up for the fact that you're not perfect either, and so you might not see anything. So I would generally approach it that way. And then I spend always on those patients, because I've had quite a few where I've been the second fiddle therapist. I've had a honest discussion with them of their findings afterwards, and I spend usually a little bit more time with them on teasing through what their findings actually mean and what it spells for their prognosis for improvement, rehabilitation wise. So I'm always looking for an opportunity to not get their hopes up that just because they got a new therapist, suddenly I'm going to solve everything and we're going to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and there's going to be puffy white clouds in the sky and the sun will always be shining. I'm going to make sure that they know I may not meet their expectations either. I'll just try not to say it maybe the same way the previous therapist said it. So hopefully it smooths things out. One of the things you've got to remember in these situations is what a little term we call service recovery. Meaning, in very simple terms, is that if you have a customer for any service, it could be your home health agency, your acute care setting, whatever it is, if they've had a bad experience, my role coming in is to try to recover them as a client. Because if all they leave with is the negative experience that they've had with the previous therapist, and that's it, what's the likelihood they'll ever come back to our particular setting or service? What's the likelihood they'll recommend us to a friend or family member? But if I spend the extra time, the due diligence of trying to smooth things out, see where they're coming from, see what I can do to make sure that that's going to be better. I mean, that's not just in therapy, that's across the board, just good business practice, service recovery. And that's how I would approach it when I am the second fiddle therapist behind a therapist that the patient fired. And with that said, I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. Hope you have a pleasant day. Take care and God bless.